Hello guys, this is the BBCC, the first episode, and we are talking about coffee. We are technically three friends. On the left,
Jason.
Hey, I'm Chris.
And I'm Ferry. And today's episode will be about the Timemore Sculptors and three Burrsets. The 078 Turbo Burrs, the 078S Espresso Focus Burrs, and the Lebrew, which is the Lebrew Filter Burr. And we received it for testing. No money exchange hands, so this is the first time that Lebrew or anybody else will see the video. They have no option to comment the video before you do. So let's dive into it. Sculptors are day-to-day grinder for the last year or so. The Lebrew burr is actually with us for the last month as a day-to-day burr.
For you?
For me, yeah. That was my day-to-day burr.
We're just using the standard 075S.
And Jason,
Burrsets.
what's your story with it?
My story with it. I was the one convincing Ferry to buy actually the Sculptor.
And me
because
as well.
yeah, you as well. Because we used Mother Grinders, which is a very popular grinder here in
We've
Hungary.
all had majors, right?
We all had majors except Ferry.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Ferry had a shitty Eureka single doser.
I did had the Eureka single dose one, which was like, you know, pimped with the SSP burrs, you know, special things, new shoot whatsoever, but it was never good enough.
Yeah, and we were craving something that's a bit tidier, a bit sexier in the kitchen, a bit smaller, quieter. In the case of the Eureka, Ferry wanted to be a bit more special. Did we say because you were using the MPs in it?
Yeah, I used the MPs in it, and it was like, for me, the MPs are sharp acidity, typical SSP burrs, sharp acidity and tea-like, and I get fed up with that, so I wanted to have something which is a little bit more multi-purpose, a little bit more espresso focused, and I just wanted to try out this 78 to 80 territory, because it's for me, it gives a much higher ceiling in flavors than the 64. The 64, for me, and this, don't quote me on that, but for me it's like, how to say, two-dimensional, so you can move up and down a little bit in terms of the acidity and sweetness, but that's it.
Yeah, I think we all concluded together that 64 mils is just it's just not enough for us, which is kind of contrary to what people say on the internet. They say size doesn't matter, but we found the opposite to be true.
That's why we are BBCC.
Yeah, and the two of us with Chris, we used to have Mother Majors with 83 mil burrs.
I was pretty convinced that I have like the end game set up with my major and the SSP Sweet Lab.
Yeah, Christoph had the Sweet Lab burrs in there, the 83 mils.
Yeah, the red speed ones, and I was pretty happy with that for V60 pour overs, for espresso as well. It had an overall good performance.
It was a great Burrset.
Yeah, exactly.
Great grinder.
The only problem with the grinder was, even though it did have the new Yazon setup.
Oh yeah, the new mods. It was single dose converted.
Yeah, exactly. So it had the pump, it had the anti-popcorn.
Oh yeah, it had all the bells and whistles that a Mother Major can have, but it was just too big and messy, and we were all craving something sexier.
And smaller and less loud. You know, the wife doesn't want to wake up for the loud noise of the grinder.
And I have to say that I was a little bit afraid of being part of the Kickstarter campaign so early. It was a long wait time, and you know, I trusted Timemore because they are a big company with good reputation. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know what to expect from the grinder. But I have to say, I had a support issue with that, and I'm gonna be super honest about it. Basically, the burr carrier and the front plate was deformed a little bit. So basically, I'm tightening the screws now to 0.7 Newton meters. I tightened them down to 2 when I did that, and it deformed the front plate, which was not good because then the burrs couldn't align. So, but my experience with Timemore was flawless. They came back to me. That was the peak time of Kickstarter within a week. I didn't consider that too long that time. I got a dedicated support person, and they replaced the full front part of the grinder. And now I mean, since November 2023, it's just flawless.
The setup of Sculpture, at least that's how I use it. The knocker, if you're not using the knocker for pour overs or any kind of filter coffee brewing method, then you can just get rid of the fines, which I think is a great additional way.
Christoph is using it for filter also. Me and
Yeah.
Ferry, we are using ZP6s for filter. That's why Christoph has more insight in the filter side of things.
Yeah.
And I quite use it daily for batch brew, so every day like 30 grams of coffee goes down my Sculpture.
For me, it's more like a retention thing. So that, you know, if I knock it down, then I get like 0.0 out of as a retention, which is I think quite good.
But quickly, now that we discussed everything about the Timemore, let's talk about the flavor. I think all three of us feel like that this is a great grinder. It could be improved in the flavor department.
Yeah.
That's why we are even sitting here and talking about the Lebrew Burrset.
Absolutely. So first, let's talk about the filter testing, because we did two testing. One filter. Jason will talk about the equipment, the method, and then we'll talk about our experiences. And then we did an espresso testing, which was with a Gajuino, to be consistent with the profile, to be consistent with temperature, and be able to measure every component of the brew.
Yeah, so we started with filter brewing. We used the Kafak flour dipper, the new Deep 27 one, and we used 10 G's of coffee, and we used the 1:16 ratio with our own DIY water, 96 degrees, and it was a washed Colombian coffee that we were using from Australia. It was what can we talk about this coffee? It has very nice citrusy acidity. It's kind of complex coffee, so I think it was perfect for this test. Well, let's talk about the results.
Yeah.
We started with the ZP6 versus the 078, right?
Yeah.
That was the first round.
Yeah.
Chris?
First batch of rounds.
Yeah, so we had a scoring sheet, just an easy one to check the body and let's call it flavor, a scent, and an overall descriptive method. So we had the ZP6 for myself. That was a nice acidity and I would say medium body. On the scent, it was quite fruity, and overall a really nice and juicy and good cup of coffee from the ZP6. For the 078, I think the first batch that we brewed with that burr, it was a bit off. So I've tasted paper notes and scented a bit floral and less fruity stuff. It was not too pleasant for me. It was very light and bottle-like. You guys?
It was light, but it was also floral. That was lacking in the ZP6 brew. I think the first 078 brew was a bit under-extracted. Then we attempted it a second time, which resulted in a better brew.
Yeah.
And the second round, it was much more close to the ZP6. But
That was
still, I
much more
think the
juicier,
ZP6 is more juicy, more rounded, more balanced, and the 078 is more. It's definitely more towards the MPs in the sense that it's more tea-like. It also has a bit nicer florality than the ZP6, but overall, I think the ZP6 is a killer.
I absolutely think that I'm a daily ZP6 user, and I had limited experience with the 078, so like the last 3 weeks practically on a day-to-day basis. And I think, and the guys basically reassured me in that perception that the 078 is more tea-like.
The 078.
078,
Turbo
yeah,
Burrs.
The Turbo Burrs are more, they are tea-like, sharper acidity.
They are still not like the MPs though, but they are closer to it than the ZP6.
The 078 for me is more like a cupping grinder, so it separates the flavor notes. It's a little bit peaking in acidity. It's more tea-like, and if you like that type of coffee, for example, if you like the MPs, I would definitely go with the 078. But if you want something more juicy,
It's less edgy than the MPs, I would say.
yeah, it's less edgy, and it's more rounded.
It's more rounded, but still not as round as the ZP6.
No.
And then compared to these two, the Lebrew Burrs. Let's jump to that.
First of all, the second round was the 078S and the Lebrew Burrs, and that was killing for me. So drinking filter coffee from the 078S and then trying the Lebrew Burrs was
Eye-opening.
hurtful. For me, it was hurtful, not just eye-opening. So.
Because Chris remembers drinking that every day.
Exactly, and so 74S was like a pretty blunt, empty, and a little acidity on the mouthfeel. And it was, by the scent, it was floral, it was light, but the overall extracted coffee was like not too pleasant. On the other hand, the Lebrew Burrset had a nice full body, it was fruity, the scent was also strong, floral, and somehow it's a light, good overall good overall experience that was hurtful to experience that the same grinder with just a different Burrset, which actually cost like $200, which is not a substantial part of the whole grinder, right? Can upgrade the grinder so much.
And I,
for myself.
Yeah, I can conclude that, and let me jump on the bandwagon of the price. So I see a lot of people on Discord are selling the Lebrew Burrs right now for like $150 max. For that price point, hold that sentence till the end. After filter, I think the Lebrew Burrs worth every penny from a filter standpoint if you want to have one grinder, because my experience is pretty much similar to what Chris was mentioning, that the Lebrew had around the finish, it had separation of tasting notes, not as much as the ZP6. ZP6 is a killer for the price. But if you don't have a ZP6 and you want to have one grinder and you want to use it for espresso and filter, I would definitely buy the Lebrew. That was my experience and my day-to-day conclusion for the last month or so. For me, Lebrew is good enough.
For me, the eye-opening moment in my life that Christoph just experienced this morning was when I first brewed a coffee with the ZP6 2 years ago when I bought it. And before that, I never had a specific filter grinder. I only had a Q2, I think, Q2 Easy Presso.
Yeah, and you've had it like 2 months.
That was a great grinder, actually. Yeah. But the thing is that if you have a filter specific grinder and if it's good, like the ZP6 078, for me the biggest thing is that it's very rounded when it's hot, it stays rounded when it cools, and it's very rounded when it's cooled down already. The thing with the 078S was that it was like basically tastes as hot, then it became drinkable, passable, kind of nice. Yeah. When it cooled down a bit, and then when we tried it cold, it was bitter as hell.
Yeah. And that's a thing with the 078S, and for me let me piggyback on the 078 as well. It has this sculptor characteristic. I don't know how to say it anyhow else, but it's like this sourness at the end. So when the finish, you have this sour taste.
Yeah, the tannins.
The tannins. I don't know how to call it, but like when you swallow it and then like after 10 seconds...
Yeah, it dries up your mouth.
Yes, that still stays.
It's definitely
it's there with the 078S. With the 078, it's fairly minimal, but it's still there.
For me, this is the same about the S and the Turbo Burrs. It's in your face acidity, and as it cools down in your mouth, it just leaves this paper-like bitterness, this drying effect.
Yeah.
And I think that was true. I don't know if it's our fault, but I think it's true for the Turbo Burrs and the S version.
Yep.
Much more so the S version.
Well, I think if we haven't used the knocker for the filters, maybe we could have avoided that. I don't feel it that much on my
the S version.
Okay, so I'm brewing at home, batch brews in the morning with the Sage Precision Brewer, and I'm not using the knockers.
So in conclusion, I think the ZP6 were the top performer in this test, and then came a second close, the Lebrews. For me, the 078 came third. it wasn't great, it wasn't bad. On the contrary, the 078S was definitely a bad brew. But I said Chris can make tasty brews with it.
Quite good.
And the Casa in the end we tried. Excited about it, guys?
Oh, let's talk about it at the end of the video.
Okay.
Let's jump to espresso.
Yeah, let's jump to espressos because I think that changes, at least my scoring a bit about how an overall good Burrset the Lebrew is, because what I experienced on the espresso side is that it had a really nice vibrating a taste and a nice scent, and overall it was a good cup of coffee. But with an espresso.
But before we jump into the espresso, we use two type of coffees.
Oh yeah,
just for the
two different
just for the sake of consistency with what we did with filter, we used one from Barn. Now that was a natural Ethiopian coffee, and one from Coffee Circle, which is again a German brand. It was again a natural Ethiopian coffee. In terms of coffees, we shouldn't make a conclusion right now. For me, Barn, in the recent editions that I have at home, is like completely flat. I can taste the tasting notes, but it's
the first episode already.
Yeah, it's flat.
Burning
so we
bridges.
jumped over the Coffee Circle coffee, and that was much better.
It was a much more vibrant, exciting cup.
It was a much better coffee.
So for espresso, we use the Lebrews, we use the 078S and the Casa, since the ZP6 and the 078S is only capable of turbo shots, and we are not here to talk about turbo shots.
Yeah, we wanted to just have a nice cup of espresso.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'll start with the 078S if you don't mind.
Let's talk about not just today, but the past 2 years that we had.
So that was my daily grinder, and we compared that to many top-end grinders like the Lagom 01, the Shirky Burrs from Cafatech, the EG1. And I would say that it produced pretty decent and complex coffee with espresso, especially with the natural ones. I really liked what the default or out of the box Burrs in the 078S produces. But I have to say that I got bored with them, or I don't know how to say, but like they produce this type of acidity peak sometimes.
It's like you push in your face and you get hit by acidity.
Yeah.
It's like a wave. It comes in wave and then it smoothes out.
But it's complex. It's good enough.
It gives you a nice body.
It
I think it's important when you're talking about espresso, and you don't want like a tea-like espresso, but like.
Well, it's all relative. I guess for compared to an amp, it gives you a nice body. Compared to a mother, I think it's lacking.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge in the everyday use because, our wives and girlfriends are also drinking with us, and they drink it predominantly with milk. And I think the 078S is not a great grinder for medium to dark roast. Then we received the Lebrew filters.
Yep.
And actually, I was surprised by that because for espresso, it was more rounded, more pleasant body than the 078S, at least today. And that was the experience with filter as well. It's much better for filter than the stock Burrs, and for me, it was better in espresso as well.
For me, that was not the case, because I prefer the nicer body of the 78S Burrsets than the Lebrew vibrating, more easy, more light brews. It had a bit of a less taste. The 78S had a bit of a less taste than the Lebrew set, but overall a nicer experience for me.
For me, it was creamier. Actually, I found that the body is better on the Lebrews. Faye?
For me, the body was much heavier on the 078S, and as you mentioned, the acidity was in my face, and it's like, wow, it's hit. And the perceived thing, that wowness that's there with the 078S. But if I look at the overall complexity, the harmony of tasting notes, that's absolutely the Lebrew. It's lighter a bit, but it has more separation. it works for espresso, and I know it works for milks. And in the milk drinks, you can still feel the tasting notes and taste the tasting notes, whatever. So for me, the Lebrew actually works, and it is going to stay. That's my conclusion.
We
It
sound
is
like
going to stay.
this is a paid review. Starting to sound very much like that, but we don't care about Lebrew's feelings. Honestly, we are doing this video because we are in search of a great Burrset for the.
Shall we discuss like what's our setup for the home use?
Yeah,
just quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Setting?
So for me, it's a Bianca, practically
From
with
Lilith.
with Lilith, a Bianca, and with 078S grinder with the Lebrew Burrs for the last month.
Yeah, I have also a Lilith Bianca with the 78S with the normal 78S Burrset. I have an Arco 2-in-1 grinder for the darker roast for my wife, and a Sage Precision Brewer for the batch brews.
Yeah, and I'm using a Garduino while I'm waiting for my Meticulous. And I use the 078S for espresso, and I use the ZP6 for filter.
So Jason, will you change your Burrsets to Lebrew?
I'm still waiting for the cost profile Burrs.
Yeah, because now we can say our conclusion is like 2-to-1 that we would change for the Lebrews. And speaking to Ryan from Lebrew, they promised to have the sweet Burrs when they're gonna produce it. It's a little bit delayed because he wants to get the profile absolutely right.
We hope this will be more espresso focused this time. Yeah, everyone is just making stupid filter burrs. We don't want more filter burrs for the Sculptor. We are fine with the ZP6. Someone give us finally a good juicy espresso burr, please.
And what I can say to the Lebrews that compared to my experience, because I know people will ask, how is the 078 SSP? I have no idea because I haven't tried it, and I don't want to try the SSPs.
Yeah, we don't care. We don't want more filter burrs.
So, yeah.
We need all-around Burrsets, and I think
And not even all around. We have so many all around Burrsets. The S, the Lebrews. We just want a good espresso
Sweet
Burrset.
espresso focused
Yes, thank
with
you
good
very
tasting
much.
notes. Yeah,
for you
please.
guys, because you have ZP6, but I do not own a ZP6. So I think for me, the Lebrew Burrsets would be a great upgrade. But will I change? No. If something like in the 83mm size Sweet Lab Burrsets, which I adore, really, I love that Burrset. If something like that would come to the Sculptor, which is really nice, usable grinder, then I would consider a change.
Yeah, I think we can come to a conclusion with the Lebrew Burrs that if someone wants to have one grinder, good filter, good espresso,
It's a
good
definite
enough
upgrade
both,
on the 078S.
that's a definite
It's a
upgrade
definite
on the
upgrade in both
78S. And
departments.
if you want a more juicy or juicier filter than the 078, and you want to drink espresso and you want to have one grinder, yeah, let's put it into the 078 grinder and drink espresso. I don't know how's the the movement of the burrs because the thread is different, blah blah blah. So the technicality is a little bit different in the 078. But
I think it's a
I
very
would have
specific buyer who bought the Turbo Burr 500
Yeah.
euro grinder, and we are not those people.
No.
So I don't think we can comment on what they should do. I think that the Lebrews were better for filter than the 078.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my favorite is still the ZP6.
Yep, I agree, and I have
Yeah.
the ZP6. Honestly, I'm gonna keep the Lebrews in the grinder because it's for me it's better than the default out of the box Burrs. But for filter, ZP6 for sure. We have one more thing on the table.
Let's
Lagom
talk
Casa
about the elephant in the
65CL.
room.
Yeah, that's the elephant in the room. I'm not gonna comment on build quality. I mean,
It's great. It's beautiful. It's done beautifully.
Flawless, I have to say. And everybody was asking how it is, and I tasted the Lagom Mini. I think it was a good enough 48 millimeter Burrset conical. It worked. And I was super excited about the 65CL. It's 65 millimeter. It grinds
What were you
18
expecting?
grams in.
Tell us your expectations. when you ordered
Why did you want this?
I wanted this because I wanted to have something that is a little bit more rounded than the Sculptor, especially for coffees that are washed, because with the washed coffees I didn't really like the Sculptor, I have to be honest, and I wanted to have something more rounded, a little bit more creamy with still separation. And how to say, the Meissen Burrs and the Moonshine Burrs had this reputation. Thanks for tuning that. So I went for the Casa. Build quality is flawless. User experience is great. It has a little bit more retention than I thought, but I don't really care.
Since the second version, because this is not the first grinder you see.
Some users were affected by some burr problems and
by some water issue they installed, and then they replaced the burrs.
They replaced they said that the burrs were the issue, so they replaced for some users the burrs. Now the grinder works. So let's talk about the taste profile. I'm gonna be super honest. I tried it out. I'm using it. For me, it's nothing special.
It makes brown juice.
Yeah.
It's quite silencing, the fragrances. I would say that compared to the others.
We can say that. So for me, honestly, would I buy it again and replace my Sculptor? Definitely not. For me, it's flat. It's with certain coffees I drank really good stuff, especially with milk-based drinks. It was good, or good enough rather. Was it better than the 078S? No, I don't think so.
My feelings are that in the beginning of this video we said that 64 mils just doesn't cut it for us, and for bigger burrs just give us more complexity. But for me, the feeling with the Casa 65 is that it's bigger just for the sake of being bigger. It's not any better than 48 mil burrs. It's not any better than small burr grinders. It's not any better than a DF whatever. For me, I just drink this and it's just one-dimensional.
Exactly. I think it's a good grinder for darker roasts, and but for darker roasts, then why would you have?
But for darker roasts, like you want a creamy, good, juicy body, you would expect this to be like a niche. You would say.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not like a niche.
It's not like a niche. However, you gave me the Axis coffee, which was darker roast, medium roast.
It was a holiday blend.
Yes.
From this Australian roast. It was a raisiny, rummy, bit of in this blend I think there's a bit of anaerobic coffee as well.
Yeah, so for that particular coffee, that's not my regular style of coffee. It gave me more exciting brews than the 078S.
How's the body compared to the S?
To the S, it was lighter. It was, with that coffee, it was much closer to the Lebrews. Actually pretty similar to the Lebrews. So if you drink that type of coffee and you want to have the Lebrew experience, go with the Casa. But for anything else that I drink, so this natural Ethiopian coffees, for me it was just flat. So I like the Lebrews much better. The build quality, flawless. The overall user experience, great. Yeah, some grinders stole, but they fixed it. And the customer service of Option-O, I'm experiencing that I experienced that, and honestly, they are all really good guys, and with communication, they are perfect. So I mean, engineering, okay, that's good. Tasting notes. Definitely not my cup of tea.
Thank you for being with us. See you in the next video.
Yep. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.